Ukrainian sources report that a single-tracked ground robot played a decisive role in neutralizing a fortified Russian position without the need for a traditional infantry assault and without exposing Ukrainian personnel to direct fire. According to the information provided, the unmanned platform delivered a large explosive charge directly to the entrance of an underground shelter where an entire Russian unit had been stationed. The device detonated at the moment when defenders least expected an attack, marking a shift in the logic of frontline combat and demonstrating how technology is redefining tactical decision-making. The event has drawn attention not as a technical curiosity, but as a clear indicator of changing battlefield dynamics. Ground robots, once used primarily for transporting ammunition or evacuating casualties, are now taking on roles usually assigned to infantry. In this operation, the robotic vehicle moved across damaged terrain under the constant threat of enemy drones, reached a reinforced position, and activated its payload before Ukrainian troops advanced to secure the area. This incident challenges long-standing assumptions about defensive security. Deep trenches and hardened shelters previously offered protection against small arms and direct infantry assaults, but the ability of a relatively inexpensive robotic platform to reach and strike these positions undermines the idea of a guaranteed safe zone behind the front line. Military planners note that if machines can bypass traditional barriers and deliver charges at close range, the cost-benefit calculation of defending fixed positions changes significantly. Ukrainian accounts emphasize that what followed was not just another tactical strike, but a demonstration of how unmanned systems can offset manpower shortages and impose higher operational costs on the opponent. Commanders are now asking whether this was an isolated case or a sign of a broader transformation in which machines lead the most dangerous phases of combat, while soldiers advance only after the highest risks have been reduced. The operation unfolded as a deliberately structured sequence of actions designed to place mechanical systems at the point of maximum danger. The robot moved through mud, debris, and terrain that typically slows infantry and exposes them to aerial surveillance. Russian drones were actively monitoring the area, making any visible movement hazardous. Yet the unmanned vehicle, immune to fatigue and fear, continued along a narrow, pre-selected route shaped by previous fighting and terrain features. This slow and deliberate approach allowed it to avoid early detection and maintain a low profile while closing the distance to the target. Russian troops, following their usual defensive habit under drone threat, stayed inside their shelter, assuming the underground position provided greater safety than open ground. This behavior turned into a vulnerability when the robotic platform reached the entrance. The defensive position had been prepared to repel infantry, not to withstand a large charge placed directly at the doorway. The detonation concentrated its force into the confined space, breaking internal structures and limiting any organized reaction. Only after the explosion did Ukrainian infantry move in. Soldiers advanced into a position already neutralized or disorganized, reducing the likelihood of ambush and lowering the overall risk of casualties. The sequence demonstrated how timing and the order of actions can redefine the balance of danger in close-quarters combat. Sending the robot first removed the need for troops to sprint under fire, approach a fortified entrance, or prepare for immediate evacuation of casualties. This incident, according to analysts, highlights a wider trend. The integration of unmanned ground systems at the front line is no longer theoretical. It is reshaping how operations are planned, how risk is distributed, and how both sides must adapt to evolving battlefield conditions. Subscribe to stay updated on developments in this rapidly changing conflict. Ukrainian accounts state that the core of the operation centered on the robot's deliberate advance toward the Russian strongpoint, a movement carried out under conditions that would have posed significant danger for infantry. The unmanned platform followed a constrained path defined by terrain damage, shell craters, and remnants of previous engagements. Its low silhouette and intermittent pauses were used to avoid detection by Russian drones that were actively monitoring the area. This measured progress reflected a tactical choice prioritizing survivability and precise timing over speed. Sources report that Russian personnel remained inside their bunker during the approach, a standard defensive response under persistent aerial surveillance. The assumption was that underground cover offered security from small arms fire, drones, and indirect strikes. However, this behavior created a predictable pattern that Ukrainian planners exploited. The shelter was designed to repel infantry assaults, not to withstand a large explosive device placed at close proximity without warning. Once the robot reached the entrance, the charge was activated at short range. The explosion generated a concentrated shockwave directed into the enclosed space. Structural elements inside the bunker were damaged, debris filled the confined area, and defenders had limited time or ability to organize a response. Ukrainian sources describe the moment as a turning point, eliminating the most hazardous stage of a traditional assault. With the fortified position disrupted, Ukrainian infantry initiated their movement only after the detonation, entering a location that no longer presented the same immediate threat. Upon advancing, Ukrainian soldiers encountered a position either neutralized or disorganized, reducing the probability of sudden close-quarters engagement. The absence of active resistance allowed troops to confirm control of the area, check for remaining defenders, and establish a foothold without sustaining early casualties. This altered risk profile was the direct result of sending the robot ahead, shifting the burden of the initial contact from personnel to machinery. The operation also cast light on the type of explosive device used. Ukrainian sources point out that the charge was based on a Soviet-era anti-tank mine, originally manufactured in large quantities for disabling armored vehicles. Its design prioritizes destructive force rather than precision. In this case, its intended defensive purpose was reversed. Instead of waiting buried under a roadway, the explosive was delivered to a shelter entrance, converting a defensive tool into an offensive asset. Analysts note that in enclosed environments, such charges are especially damaging because the blast has limited space to disperse. Hardened shelters built to withstand fragments and small arms fire offer limited protection against a powerful close-range detonation. The method of delivery, placing the device on an unmanned ground platform, allowed Ukrainian forces to bypass one of the greatest risks of battlefield logistics: the exposure of troops carrying heavy explosives across open ground under drone surveillance. This adaptation highlights how widely available munitions can be repurposed under battlefield pressure. Their effectiveness in this operation depended not on precision placement, but on proximity, making them suitable for systems that may move slowly or pause during approach. The destruction of the Russian position demonstrated that a simple device, combined with unmanned delivery, can challenge long-standing assumptions about the security of defensive fortifications. Ukrainian analysts argue that this case illustrates the broader evolution of unmanned systems. Ground robots previously used for logistical support have increasingly proven capable of surviving in contested areas and operating under drone threat. Their ability to carry significant payloads, maintain low visibility, and continue movement without the constraints of human endurance has encouraged commanders to employ them in direct roles previously limited to assault teams. This approach addresses the operational realities of a prolonged conflict. Ukrainian forces face sustained pressure on manpower, making every prepared soldier a strategic asset. By delegating the most hazardous segment of the operation to a machine, commanders preserved personnel strength for later stages and reduced the cumulative strain on infantry units. The incident therefore reflects both a tactical success and a shift in force management philosophy. Analysts add that the use of robots for high-risk tasks allows repeated attempts without the human cost associated with traditional assaults. A platform can be repaired or replaced far more easily than trained personnel, and its loss does not carry the same operational or societal implications. This enables commanders to test suspected enemy positions, disrupt defensive nodes, and force reactions without committing troops prematurely. In the context of modern warfare dominated by aerial reconnaissance, the robot's slow, controlled movement also underscored how timing has become a decisive factor. Both sides must account for continuous drone coverage, reduced mobility windows, and elevated exposure risks. By using a machine that could pause, wait, and proceed without fear or fatigue, Ukrainian forces synchronized the moment of detonation with a period of reduced enemy alertness. Overall, the detailed sequence of events illustrates how unmanned ground platforms are reshaping frontline tactics. The robot's advance, the placement of the explosive charge, and the subsequent infantry movement combined to produce an outcome that minimized Ukrainian losses while undermining the defensive logic of a hardened Russian position. The wider implications of the operation are drawing attention from military analysts, who note that the use of unmanned ground platforms in direct assault roles may force adjustments in Russian defensive planning. Fortified positions such as trenches, bunkers, and underground shelters were previously optimized to slow infantry, withstand indirect fire, and resist small arms attacks. However, the recent strike demonstrated that these structures offer limited protection when a powerful charge is delivered directly to their entrances by a machine capable of approaching without fear or fatigue. According to assessments from Ukrainian sources, this dynamic places Russian forces in a tactical dilemma. Remaining underground increases vulnerability to close-range explosive attacks, while moving above ground exposes soldiers to aerial surveillance and strikes from drones. This tension may compel Russian units to disperse more widely, rather than concentrate personnel inside single defensive points. Such dispersal can weaken the strength of individual positions and complicate command and control, making coordination more difficult once combat begins. In response to the growing use of ground robots, Russian forces are expected to intensify efforts to detect and counter unmanned systems. Expanded drone patrols may be deployed to monitor ground movements as closely as aerial activity. Electronic warfare systems could also become more prominent, as jamming or disrupting control links may cause unmanned vehicles to halt or fail before reaching their targets. These countermeasures, however, require additional resources and may shift focus away from other operational needs. Analysts suggest that physical obstacles and layered defenses may reappear along segments of the front line. Improvised barriers, trenches reshaped to restrict vehicle movement, and enhanced monitoring equipment could be used to channel or block robots. Yet these measures carry trade-offs. Reinforcing barriers slows the mobility of defending troops and increases logistical complexity, while additional sensors demand more operators and maintenance. The broader operational tempo is also expected to evolve. As both sides adapt to the presence of unmanned platforms in assault roles, the speed of offensive and defensive reactions may shift. The conflict increasingly resembles a contest of rapid learning, where each technological adjustment prompts a countermeasure. The side that adapts more quickly may gain temporary advantages until the opposing force adjusts again. Strategic decision-making at higher command levels is also influenced by the emergence of ground robots in direct combat roles. Commanders now assess opportunities for operations that previously may have been deemed too costly if infantry were required to lead. Because machines do not incur political or human losses, missions involving elevated risks become more feasible when conducted with unmanned platforms. However, this introduces new vulnerabilities. If opposing forces develop effective counter-robot tactics, reliance on such systems may reduce operational flexibility. The incident additionally highlights a shift in the distribution of battlefield risk. Where infantry once absorbed the brunt of early-phase combat, machines are increasingly positioned at the forefront. This pattern reflects the constraints of a prolonged war, in which Ukraine seeks to preserve trained personnel while maintaining pressure on Russian forces. Ground robots allow planners to test enemy positions, probe defenses, and deliver explosive payloads without committing troops to the most hazardous stage of engagement. Despite their growing role, analysts caution that unmanned systems do not replace infantry in tasks requiring adaptability, sustained presence, or rapid judgment. Securing and holding territory, responding to sudden changes in the battlefield environment, and coordinating complex movements still rely on trained soldiers. Unmanned platforms instead reshape how risk is allocated and how early contact with enemy positions is managed. For Russian forces, the expanding use of robots creates uncertainty about the scale and distribution of future threats. Familiar munitions, such as the Soviet-designed anti-tank mines repurposed in this operation, can now be delivered in unanticipated ways. Defensive positions must account not only for aerial strikes, but also for ground-based systems moving slowly and deliberately toward critical structures. This uncertainty places additional strain on defensive planning and resource allocation. Observers conclude that this operation marks a notable shift within the broader context of the conflict. The integration of unmanned ground systems into offensive action reflects evolving tactics driven by manpower constraints, persistent drone surveillance, and the need to reduce risks to soldiers. It also underscores a larger trend. Warfare on this front is increasingly defined not only by weapons, but by how quickly each side adapts to new methods. As unmanned systems spread across the battlefield, both Ukrainian and Russian forces face a continually shifting set of threats and countermeasures. The strike carried out by the Ukrainian robotic platform reinforces a central theme emerging from the conflict. The traditional sequence of combat is being reshaped in real time. Machines now often make the first contact, reducing the danger faced by personnel and enabling infantry to enter contested areas under more favorable conditions. Whether this represents a temporary adaptation or the early stage of a more permanent transformation remains an open question. Subscribe to stay informed about ongoing developments and further analysis from the front line.